It is a common misconception and even a modern trap to believe that when we feel empty, unmotivated, or directionless, we are somehow broken or inherently flawed. This perception often leads us to seek quick fixes or blame ourselves for a condition that is, in fact, deeply human. Viktor Frankl, with his wisdom forged in the depths of suffering and resilience, offers us a radically different and liberating perspective. The feeling of being broken or existential angst is not a flaw, but rather an indication that we are fundamentally searching for something greater. We are in a continuous process of searching for meaning, and this search is, in itself, a sign of vitality and humanity. Viktor Frankl, with his clinical acumen and unparalleled personal experience, identified something he called the mass neurosis of modern society. This neurosis refers not to a mental illness in the traditional sense, but to a widespread condition that permeates contemporary culture. A profound and disturbing sense of existential emptiness, of a lack of purpose and meaning in life. It is as if, despite all the material progress, the superabundance of information, and the technological innovations that promise to make our lives easier, many people feel fundamentally disoriented, like ships adrift without a compass. He observed that in our time, there is a growing tendency for people to feel broken or inadequate when they experience this distress. They may blame themselves, believing that there is something intrinsically wrong with them for not feeling fulfilled or for not finding a clear purpose. Frankl, however, vehemently rejects this interpretation. For him, this condition is not a sign that you have failed as an individual or that you are deficient in some way. Rather, it is a reflection of a cultural landscape in which the traditional values that once provided a framework for meaning have eroded, and where the relentless pursuit of pleasure, what he called the will to pleasure, power, the will to power, or material consumption fails to fulfill the true, deepest human need for meaning. Imagine a society where success is measured by acquisitions, the speed at which one advances in one's career, or the number of followers on social media. These are external, often superficial metrics that rarely touch the soul. Frankl realized that by focusing too much on these pursuits, people distance themselves from their innate capacity to find deeper, more lasting meaning. The result is this existential gap, a hole that cannot be filled by material possessions or empty praise. This mass neurosis is a wake-up call, a signal that the human psyche yearns for something more substantial, more authentic. Understanding this is the first step toward alleviating the guilt and shame that many feel when experiencing this anguish, transforming it from an individual problem into a social phenomenon that paradoxically validates the deep human need to find purpose. Far from being a pathology to be cured or a problem to be suppressed at all costs, Viktor Frankl, with his profound and humanistic vision, saw existential emptiness as a valuable opportunity. This perspective is one of the pillars of logotherapy and differs radically from the conventional view that often stigmatizes or medicalizes this feeling of lack of meaning. For Frankl, emptiness is not a dead end or an abyss to be feared. On the contrary, it can be compared to a blank space in one's journey, a reflective pause, or even an unexplored field waiting to be explored. It is not a defect, but a tacit invitation to the adventure of discovery. Think about it. When a space is empty, it automatically invites us to fill it. The anguish and restlessness that emptiness generates are therefore not mere negative symptoms to be eliminated. In fact, they are an undeniable impulse, an inner voice that calls for something deeper than the superficiality of distractions and meaningless routine. It is your soul signaling that there is something to be found, a purpose to be unearthed, a more authentic connection to be established with life and the world. It is as if life is whispering, there is still more for you, there is still something to be revealed. Frankl encourages us not to run away from this emptiness with addictions, excessive entertainment, or compulsive work. Instead, he invites us to face it, to listen to what it has to say. It is in this space of not knowing or not having a clear purpose that the true search begins. It is there that a person becomes more open to the reality of what truly matters, to the values that move them, and to the responsibilities that call them. Accepting this emptiness as a catalyst for discovery and personal growth is the first and fundamental step in transforming it from a source of suffering into a powerful driving force for finding meaning in life. It is an invitation for you to actively engage in the construction of your own meaning. Throughout the history of psychology, various theories have attempted to unravel the primary motivating force behind human behavior. Sigmund Freud, for example, postulated that we are driven primarily by the will to pleasure, libido, seeking to satisfy impulses and reduce tension. Alfred Adler, on the other hand, argued that the central motivation was the will to power, the quest for superiority and self-affirmation. Viktor Frankl, with his keen observation of the human condition, especially his experiences in concentration camps, where both pleasure and power were brutally denied, came to a radically different conclusion. He proposed that the most fundamental and intrinsic driving force of human beings is not pleasure or power, but rather the will to meaning. Frankl believed that we are not broken because we do not experience enough pleasure in our lives, or because we do not accumulate power or material possessions. Rather, we feel empty and restless because this inherent will to meaning is not being satisfied. It is like thirst that instinctively drives us to seek water when we are dehydrated. The search for meaning is a basic and vital need for our psychic and existential health, as fundamental as hunger or sleep. When this need is neglected or frustrated, it manifests itself as existential emptiness, apathy, despair, or the feeling that life has no purpose. Recognizing this will to meaning as the true internal compass of our existence is a profoundly empowering act. It shows us that the search for meaning is not a character defect, a failure to adapt, or a mere philosophical whim. On the contrary, it is a defining characteristic of our humanity, a signature of our condition. It is proof that our existence, in its deepest essence, cries out for something that transcends the self, for a purpose that gives value and direction to our lives. This understanding frees us from the guilt of not fitting into superficial patterns of success and guides us towards what truly fulfills us, the discovery and realization of personal meaning. One of the most liberating and, at the same time, most challenging insights from Viktor Frankl's Logotherapy is the notion that meaning is not something we invent or create out of thin air, as if it were a purely subjective construct, or a personal fiction that we concoct to make ourselves feel better. On the contrary, Frankl insisted that meaning is discoverable. It's already there, waiting to be revealed in the situations of life, in the people we meet, in the responsibilities we are presented with, and even in the suffering we face. This distinction is crucial because it frees us from an immense pressure, that of having to fabricate a grand and original purpose. Many of us feel paralyzed or broken because we cannot invent a meaning of life that feels worthy or impactful enough. Frankl shows us that we do not need to strive to create meaning out of emptiness. Rather, we need to open ourselves to perceive it where it already is. Meaning is not something you project onto the world, but something the world, life, and circumstances ask of you. Life does not ask us questions in the abstract. It challenges us in concrete situations. Meaning can be found in a spontaneous act of kindness toward a stranger, in a commitment to a challenging project at work, in unconditional love for a child, in the serene contemplation of the beauty of nature, or in the courage and dignity with which we deal with a chronic illness. Each of these situations contains a meaning that can be grasped. Therefore, the search for meaning is not an isolated introspection in which we try to give meaning to the emptiness within. It is an invitation to be present, attentive, and receptive to the calls of life. It is a process of engagement with the world and with others, where purpose emerges from genuine interaction and responsibility. This perspective relieves us of excessive self-demand and directs us toward attentive observation and openness to the opportunities for meaning that arise in every moment, often in the simplest and most everyday things. It is an invitation to embrace reality as it presents itself, because it is there that meaning awaits us to be discovered. This is undoubtedly one of Viktor Frankl's most powerful and liberating concepts, forged in the furnace of his own experiences in the Nazi concentration camps. Even in the most horrific and inhumane circumstances imaginable, where prisoners were stripped of everything, their possessions, their families, their dignity, and even their identities, Frankl observed that human beings possessed an inalienable freedom, the freedom to choose their attitude toward the inevitable. This is an idea that challenges the common notion that we are merely products of our circumstances. Frankl argues that while you may not be able to change an external situation that is imposed on you, an illness, a loss, an injustice, a prison, you always have the ultimate prerogative of how you will react to it. It is in this choice of attitude that lies the ultimate human power to find meaning. No matter how unfavorable or painful the conditions, the ability to decide how we will position ourselves in relation to them remains intact. Imagine, for example, someone who receives a terminal diagnosis. Illness is inevitable, but the attitude a person chooses to take toward it, whether to give in to despair, to live each day with gratitude, to use the remaining time to connect with loved ones, or to leave a legacy, defines the meaning of that experience. Frankl saw prisoners in the camps who, despite all their deprivation, chose to comfort others, to share a piece of bread, or to maintain hope through the memory of a loved one. These choices, however small they may seem, were acts of immense freedom and dignity that infused meaning into an otherwise painful existence. This freedom does not mean that you will not feel pain, suffering, or sadness. It means that even in the midst of these emotions, you can choose how you will position yourself, what values you will display, and what meaning you will attribute to your experience. It is in this choice of attitude, of resilience, of dignity, of love, of courage, or of purpose that meaning can be forged. It transforms adversity from a random burden into a fertile ground for personal growth and the manifestation of one's highest spirit. Frankl reminds us that the ultimate human freedom is the freedom to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances. This is undoubtedly one of the most challenging and, at the same time, most profoundly humanizing insights from Viktor Frankl's Logotherapy. It is crucial to understand that Frankl, having experienced the hell of the concentration camps himself, did not romanticize suffering or see it as something desirable. His perspective is not an invitation to passive resignation in the face of pain, but rather a profound reflection on the human capacity to find purpose even when faced with the inevitable and the unbearable. Frankl insisted that when suffering is an inescapable reality, such as the loss of a loved one, an incurable disease, a brutal injustice, or a personal tragedy, it can be transfigured, that is, transformed into an opportunity to find meaning. Pain in itself has no inherent meaning. No one seeks suffering for its own sake. Meaning resides not in suffering, but in the attitude we adopt toward it. It is the way we choose to carry our cross, how we respond to adversity, that infuses the experience with meaning? Consider the countless examples of people who, faced with immense pain, choose not to succumb to despair, but to channel their experience into helping others, fighting for a cause, finding a new way of living, or cultivating compassion. How do we choose to carry the weight of loss? What values do we manifest when confronted with finitude or injustice? What personal growth? What new perspective? What form of resilience emerges from this experience? The ability to extract a yes from life, even in the face of the most acute pain, is one of the greatest manifestations of human freedom. This perspective frees us from the paralyzing idea that suffering breaks us without purpose. Frankl shows us that paradoxically, the cracks created by pain can be precisely the places through which the light of meaning can enter. The way we face pain and adversity can reveal our greatest courage, our deepest compassion, and our ability to transcend circumstances, becoming more whole, not in spite of suffering, but through the attitude we choose toward it. Being in search means, in part, looking for and building that meaning even in life's darkest experiences. Viktor Frankl, as a physician and psychiatrist, was deeply critical of the modern tendency to over-psychologize all forms of human distress and malaise. He realized that many of the concerns, frustrations, and despair that people felt and that led them to seek professional help were not necessarily symptoms of a mental illness to be cured with medication or therapies that aimed only at symptomatic relief. Instead, Frankl saw them as legitimate and often healthy existential conflicts. For him, feeling meaningless, distressed by the finiteness of life, overwhelmed by freedom of choice, or questioning the purpose of existence itself was not a pathology to be eradicated. It was rather a natural and expected reaction of a human consciousness that yearns for something deeper than mere survival or superficial pleasure. He argued that by pathologizing this quest, psychology ran the risk of medicalizing the human condition itself, transforming philosophical and existential questions into clinical problems. This de-psychologization means first recognizing that you are not broken or sick for feeling these things. Feelings of emptiness or existential angst are not a sign that something is wrong with you, but rather an indication that something fundamentally human, the desire for meaning, is active and seeking fulfillment. It is a sign that you are engaged in a vital process of inquiry, a process that can lead to deep growth and a more authentic and meaningful life. Frankl argued that rather than trying to suppress these anxieties, we should learn to understand them as signals. They are like a fever that indicates that there is an internal process going on. The treatment in this case is not a cure for the fever, but rather the search for what is causing the fever, the absence of meaning. By validating this experience as an inherent part of the human quest, Frankl offers a powerful message of relief and empowerment, inviting us to face these questions with courage and transform them into catalysts for finding our purpose. 4. Viktor Frankl, life is not just a series of events that happen to us passively. It is, fundamentally, a continuous series of questions that life asks us. And to each of these questions, it is our responsibility to answer. This is a central idea in logotherapy and a pillar for understanding that you are not broken because you feel purposeless, but rather because you may not yet have fully assumed your role of actively responding to these existential questions. Frankl argued that life does not wait for us to give us meaning. It constantly questions us. Each day, each interaction, each task, each challenge, each joy and each pain presents itself as a question to which we are called to give an answer. And this answer is not theoretical, merely thought or philosophized. It is practical, manifested, in our actions, in our choices, and crucially, in our attitude. Being in search is not a passive activity, like waiting for meaning to find us sitting on the couch. It is a call to action, to engagement. It means being a leading actor in your own existence, and not just a passive observer of your life. When we position ourselves as mere spectators, waiting for circumstances to bring us meaning or for someone to tell us what our purpose is, we inevitably fall into an existential void. Fulfillment for Frankl will not come from waiting for meaning to magically appear, but from actively engaging with the world, assuming our responsibilities and making choices that reflect our deepest values. This responsibility implies assuming, the freedom that Frankl emphasizes so much. If we are free to choose our attitude, we are also responsible for the consequences of our choices and for the way we respond to the demands of life. It is through this active and responsible stance that meaning reveals itself. A student who decides to dedicate himself to his studies, a professional who seeks excellence in his task, a friend who offers support in a difficult time, a parent who dedicates himself to his children. All these are examples of how we concretely respond to life's questions, constructing and discovering meaning in the process. It is this proactive stance that moves us from being broken to seeking, and finally to finding and fulfilling meaning. A common misconception in the search for meaning is the idea that we need to find a single, grand, definitive life purpose that, once discovered, will solve all our dilemmas and fulfill us forever. Viktor Frankl, with his profound and practical wisdom, teaches us that the search for meaning is much more nuanced and comprehensive. It is not limited to this final big goal, but encompasses the ability to find meaning in both the small moments of everyday life and in larger, transcendent goals. For Frankl, meaning can be found in the simplest, most immediate experiences of the here and now. In every genuine human interaction, a smile exchanged, a listening ear, a caring gesture. In every task we perform with dedication, whether it's crafting, writing a text, or preparing a meal, in every act of love or service we offer, each of these micro-occasions contains a meaning that can be revealed and fulfilled. It's the beauty of losing yourself in a good book, the joy of helping someone, the satisfaction of completing a project. Furthermore, Frankl also points to a meaning that transcends the individual self, connecting us to something greater than ourselves. Through dedication to a social cause, unconditional love for a loved one, the search for truth or beauty, or even a spiritual dimension that gives cosmic meaning to our existence. This transcendence takes us out of a purely egocentric focus and opens us to interconnection with the world and with others. The beauty of the search for meaning, therefore, lies in this duality and complementarity. Finding meaning in the present, in everyday actions and interpersonal relationships, while remaining open and aware of a greater purpose that calls us to go beyond our immediate limitations. You are not broken if you have not yet found the meaning of life, because life is full of meanings to be discovered at every step. Finally, Viktor Frankl's central idea, "You are not broken, you are searching," culminates in one of the most profound and liberating insights into the human condition. This perspective reveals to us that human fulfillment is not a static state of being complete, as if we were a finished product that, once assembled and fixed, remains perfect. On the contrary, Frankl teaches us that true fulfillment lies in the ongoing search itself. We are beings in constant becoming, in an eternal process of improvement, discovery, and self-transcendence. Life is not a destination to be reached, but a journey, a river that flows endlessly. Beauty, meaning, and fulfillment lie not only in an imaginary endpoint, but in every step we take along the way, in every choice we make, in every challenge we face and overcome. Being in search is therefore the most natural, authentic, and healthy state of being human. It is recognizing that life is a constant invitation to self-transcendence, to go beyond oneself, to not close oneself off in one's own self, but to turn to something or someone outside of oneself. It is the ability to find and fulfill meanings that drive us, that give us a reason to live, and that, paradoxically, fulfill us in the process. When we feel broken, it is often because we are resisting this dynamic nature of existence. We are stuck in the idea that we should be fixed or whole once and for all. Frankl frees us from this illusion by showing us that vitality lies in movement, curiosity, responsibility, and constant openness to the new. Accepting that fulfillment lies in one's own continuous search allows us to embrace imperfection, uncertainty, and challenges as an inherent part of a rich and meaningful life. It is the journey that gives meaning to the traveler,